The town of Tumbleton is cheering. Their enemy lies dead in the trampled grass. Lord Ormund Hightower, Hand of the King, the man who marched a year through the Reach to burn them. A dying Northman cut him down at the very foot of his own banner. The great green host is leaderless. The walls have held. The town has won. And then a shadow falls across the celebration. Two shadows, vast and winged, rising not from the enemy lines, but from inside the town, from the two dragons sent to protect it. The men look up. They see Vermithor, the Bronze Fury, the dragon of the old king himself. They see Silverwing beside him. They see their own riders. And then the jaws open. They had come as the town's shield. In one heartbeat, they became the thing that destroyed it. Welcome to Westeros Within, where the fires of history still burn. This is House of the Dragon, the true history. Chapter 6. The Betrayal at Tumbleton. This is the day two dragons sent to save a town turned in the sky and burned it to ash, and the day the dance of the dragons stopped being a war of two queens and became a free-for-all of fire. When we left this war, the realm was aflame. Rhaenyra had taken King's Landing and sat the Iron Throne her father promised her. The Blacks had drowned the lions at the fish feed and butchered the Green's finest commander, Ser Criston Cole, in the mud at the butcher's ball. But every victory had cost them dearly, and the greatest weapon of the war, ancient Vhagar, still ruled the sky under Emond One Eye, burning the riverlands raw. And now, out of the south, the Green's last great hope was rising. For most of a year, Lord Ormund Hightower of Old Town, Hand of the King, kinsman to Queen Alicent, had been grinding north through the Reach. With him marched the largest Green army left in all the field, very near 20,000 men, a tenth of them mounted knights. A slow tide of steel rolling toward the capital. And only one thing stood in its way: a rich market town on the River Mander, seat of House Footley, a place called Tumbleton, the last black stronghold between Ormund's host and King's Landing. If Tumbleton fell, the road to the city lay open. The war could be decided here. But to understand Tumbleton, you must first understand the boy who rode at Ormund's side, Prince Daeron Targaryen, 16 years old. He had the look of the blood of the dragon, silver gold hair, the fine Valyrian features. He was the youngest son of King Viserys and Queen Alicent, full brother to Aegon, to Aemond the One-Eyed, to poor mad Helaena. And of all those sons, Daeron was the gentlest, the most courteous, the most beloved. Sent to Old Town as a boy to serve Lord Ormund as cupbearer and squire, he was the prince the small folk would have chosen had anyone thought to ask them. He flew a dragon called Tessarion. The Blue Queen, her scales deep cobalt, her wings burnished copper, beautiful and young and slender. She was smaller than the great beasts of the war. Remember that. It matters. In the third week of the year 130, Daeron earned his name. Ormund's host had been caught on the banks of the Honeywine, pincered between two black armies at once. The lines were crumbling. A rout looked certain. The whole Green hope undone in an afternoon. And then a shadow swept the field. Daeron came down on Tessarion and loosed her fire into the attackers. The Blacks broke. Near defeat turned into rout, and the rout into slaughter. That night, Lord Ormund knighted the boy upon the field with the Valyrian longsword Vigilance and gave him the name the host would sing, Daeron the Daring. They say the modest prince protested, that Tessarion was the true hero of the day, not him. After the Honeywine, the green tide rolled on. They besieged Longtable. They stormed and sacked Bitterbridge, and the sack of Bitterbridge was merciless. Daeron had Tessarion burn the town, for it was at Bitterbridge that his own small nephew, the boy Prince Maelor, not yet 4 years old, had been pulled apart by a mob as men fought to claim him. Whether the gentle prince burned that town in grief or in cold vengeance, no chronicle can truly say. But this we know. By the time the host reached Tumbleton, Daeron the Daring was already blooded. His dragon had already burned a town. That is the boy. Hold him in your mind. For the blacks knew the green tide was coming, and Rhaenyra answered it. She raised a new host, river lords and valleymen, and the grizzled Northmen they called the Winter Wolves. And to stiffen it, she sent 2 of her own dragon riders south to hold the line at Tumbleton. You may remember them. They were dragonseeds, baseborn, dragon-blooded, who had won their mounts in the great sowing on Dragonstone, when men died and burned by the dozen to claim the riderless dragons. 4 had succeeded. 2 of them now flew to Tumbleton's defense. The first was Hard Hugh Hammer, a giant of a man, dark-haired and baseborn, the bastard son of a common blacksmith. Hands so strong, the chronicles say, that he could twist steel bars into torques. Untrained as a knight, but terrifying with the warhammer that gave him his name, his blows could crush a man within his armor. And the dragon he had claimed was Vermithor, the Bronze Fury, once the mount of Jaehaerys, the old king himself. At the time of the dance, the second largest and second oldest dragon in all the world, near 100 years of age, surpassed only by ancient Vagr, a blacksmith's bastard, riding a king's dragon. The second was Ulf the White. White-haired, with Valyrian features, he claimed to be the natural son of some Targaryen prince, though no one was ever quite sure which, and Ulf himself was not always sober enough to be consistent. For Ulf was a drunkard, a glutton, a man of the wine sinks, and his dragon was Silverwing, once the mount of good Queen Alysanne, the old king's beloved wife, Vermithor's mate. And here is the seed of everything that followed. For claiming these magnificent beasts, Rhaenyra had knighted both men and granted them lands of their own, a few rocky holdings, and little more. And both men felt the insult of it down to the bone. They rode the most fearsome creatures the world had ever seen. They thought themselves kingmakers, the equals of any lord, and the queen had paid them in scraps. She sent them to Tumbleton as its shield. She had no idea what she had armed. Tumbleton held some 9,000 men, soldiers of House Caswell and House Merryweather, Riverlanders, and the Winter Wolves, those hard old Northmen under Lord Roderick Dustin, whom men called Roddy the Ruin, fresh from their bloody work at the fish feed and the butcher's ball. And among the commanders who held that town were 2 faces you may remember, Sir Garibald Grey and Sir Pate of Longleaf, the Lion Slayer. For these were the men who had stood beneath the ridge at the butcher's ball and watched the greatest knight of the realm fall to 3 common arrows. They had ridden south from that field carrying a grim trophy on a spear, the severed head of Ser Criston Cole, the Kingmaker. They had carried it here, to Tumbleton, as if to say to Lord Ormund Hightower, "This is what waits for you on the road to King's Landing." With them came the deadly archer, Red Rob Rivers, and his bowmen out of Raventree. And Lord Footley held the town itself, though his own garrison was small, 40 men, no more. But the rot was already inside the walls, for the Greens had played a quiet trick, men who seemed to have fled before Lord Hightower's terrible army. Refugees, beggars, the broken and the homeless were in truth his own soldiers, slipped into Tumbleton to whisper, to weaken, to betray. Treachery was in the town before the first dragon ever rose. The battle began with steel. Sir Garibald Grey led 6,000 men out against Ormund's host. The Hightower archers and heavy horse thinned them and threw them back, and Red Rob Rivers's bowmen covered the bloody retreat. And then Roddy the Ruin made his charge. Outnumbered 10-1, Lord Roderick led his winter wolves out a postern gate. A single, suicidal spear thrown straight at the head of the snake. Not at the army, at the man who led it. They carved their way through the green host, all the way to Lord Ormund's own banner. Sir Brynden Hightower threw himself between the Northman and his lord, and with a long axe took Roddy's shield arm off at the shoulder. It was not enough. Roddy the Ruin, dying on his feet, slew them both. Sir Brynden Hightower and Lord Ormund Hightower, Hand of the King, before he himself finally fell. The Green Commander was dead, his kinsman dead beside him. The host that had marched a year through the Reach was suddenly leaderless and reeling, and the defenders of Tumbleton lifted their voices and cheered. They thought they had won. Then the sky betrayed them. They had seen Tessarion across the field, and they had not been afraid. She was the small one, the young one. One blue dragon against their two great beasts. They liked those odds. The shock was never going to come from the enemy. It came from within. At the height of the battle, with Ormund dead and the town celebrating its deliverance, Hard Hugh Hammer on Vermithor and Ulf the White on Silverwing turned their cloaks and turned their dragons on the very town they had been sent to defend. Vermithor, Silverwing, and now Tessarion, sweeping in from the green side to join them. 3 dragons, loosing their fire together upon a market town of timber and thatch. There is no defending against that. There never was. The men who had cheered a moment before now ran, or burned where they stood. The buildings of Tumbleton went up like a torch, and the survivors who fled toward the river Mander drowned in their thousands trying to cross it. Treachery had won the field. They had come as the town's shield. They left as the thing that destroyed it. History would give that day a name: the Treasons of Tumbleton. And then it got worse. For with Lord Ormund and Sir Brynden both dead, Roddy the Ruin's parting gift, there was no firm hand left to hold the green host. Command should have fallen to Sir Hobart Hightower, Ormund's cousin, and Sir Hobart was not the man to restrain anyone. So the Sack of Tumbleton was a thing of horror. The garrison surrendered and was put to the sword regardless. And Sir John Roxton, bold John, who bore the Valyrian sword Orphan Maker, claimed the Lady Sharras Footley as a prize of war. When her lord husband dared protest, Roxton cut him near in two, and is remembered to have said, as he turned back to the weeping lady, "She can make widows too." The town's lord dead, his lady taken. His people fled into the fire and the river. And the only royal of any standing left in that camp was a boy of 16. Daeron the Daring, the gentlest of his brothers, the hero of the Honeywine. Sickened, he ordered Sir Hobart to put a stop to the slaughter. Sir Hobart proved useless. And so the prince, who could win a battle from Dragonback, stood helpless on the ground and presided over a massacre he could not stop. The gentlest of the Targaryens, watching his victory curdle into something monstrous. Beyond the smoking ruin, in the scorched fields, 2 great dragons coiled together at rest, Vermithor and Silverwing. Mates, side by side, just as their riders had betrayed the town side by side. Because now the betrayers wanted their reward, and it was far more than a few rocky holdings. Hard Hugh Hammer began to style himself Lord Hammer. He rode the old king's own dragon now, and among his followers a prophecy began to spread, passed soldier to soldier in the camp. When the hammer shall fall upon the dragon, a new king shall arise, and none shall stand before him. A man named Hammer, riding to war upon dragons, he took it to mean himself. And so Hugh, the blacksmith's bastard, began, in the words of the histories, to dream of crowns. Ulf the White wanted a kingdom too. The Greens, through Daeron, named him Lord of Bitterbridge. Ulf scorned it. He demanded Highgarden instead. And there is a sentiment, set down by Septon Eustace, that frames the whole rotten thing. He tells us the betrayers had come to believe a single hard truth, that the black had no king and the green had no right. Both sides false, both thrones illegitimate, and the crown, perhaps, theirs for the taking. Whether either man ever truly said as much, or whether a moralizing Septon polished it later into something too clean, we cannot know. But it fit the men and the moment exactly. The Greens, meanwhile, were already afraid of what they had bought. 13 lords of the Reach, sickened by the overmighty low-born riders in their midst, began to gather quietly at a Tumbleton inn called the Bloody Caltrops. They became known as the Caltrops, led by Lord Unwin Peake and that same useless Sir Hobart Hightower. They came to fear these dragonseeds, to despise them, and, behind closed doors, to plot how they might be rid of them. Here is the truth that Tumbleton lays bare. Both sides used these men as weapons, and neither would see them as equals. The blacks paid them too little. The Greens would soon pay them in poison and steel. Give a man a god's power and a beggar's place, and sooner or later he decides the rules were never fair. The war that began over a crown had become a thing where dragonriders sold the sky to the highest bidder and burned whole towns to be made lords. And as for why Hugh and Ulf truly turned in that one fatal heartbeat above the cheering town, the honest chronicle gives us nothing, for neither man could read nor write. They left no account. And so, as the Meisters themselves confess, we shall never truly know what drove the two betrayers to do what they did. Every reason we have was handed down to us by other men, hostile men, frightened men. The one truth is the fire. The rest is smoke. So Tumbleton fell, and the road to King's Landing lay open at last. But the green host that won it was a poisoned thing. Glutted on plunder, leaderless, gathered around a smoking ruin. Two low-born dragonriders dreaming of crowns and kingdoms, and the great lords already meeting in the dark to plan their murder. These men would not live out the year. The hammer would fall, the cup would be filled, and Tumbleton itself had not yet seen its last battle, nor its last burning. But, for now, the road stood open. The Greens had a dragon host gathered a few days' ride from the capital, and word of it was already racing ahead, on the wings of every raven and the lips of every fleeing man, toward the city on the Blackwater. And in King's Landing, Rhaenyra heard, a queen who had won the Iron Throne and was about to learn how little a throne is worth when the city beneath it turns against you. For the next fire would not fall upon some market town in the Reach. It would fall upon the capital itself. That is where we go next, to the days the people of King's Landing rose, the dragons died in the pit, and a queen lost everything she had bled to win. I am Westeros within. If these old fires still burn for you, then subscribe and ride with me into the next chapter. For the true history is far from finished, and the worst of the dance is still to come.